So my background actually is outside the games industry. Games Analytics was founded 2 years ago. And what we have done is a combination of games industry veterans and myself as a sort of data mining guy, working with traditional banks, with retailers and telcos, and bringing what is a very strong discipline within the banking sector, retailers and telcos, which is a very strong focus on customers, customer value, customer retention, and years of investment building big databases, building systems to create a proactive and intelligent relationship with customers. That's what banks and retailers have been doing for the last 20 years. And there's a big opportunity in the games industry to reproduce that approach. And so we think that as the games industry gets better at using data, customer relationship management will turn into player relationship management within games to build these personalized experiences. So what I'd like to do through the talk is give you a bit of insight as to how we deliver that at Games Analytics. You actually might think that banks do this sort of thing relatively well, maybe not so well. And the reason is that banks actually don't know that much about you. They know transaction histories, they know balances. But if you think about it for a minute, within the game environment, we know everything that we want to know about the player's experience. We can collect every event. We can go into rich detail in terms of how players are experiencing their XPs and the resources that they're using, which features they're consuming, which features they're leaving alone. We've got a very rich set of data so it can really understand in totality the different players' behaviors and react to that, become responsive to that, and truly become proactive in terms of managing those relationships. So here's the opportunity, we think. Analytics has got to be actionable. If you have an average session per user metric, and it turns out that for your game it's 1.2, doesn't really tell you very much. You need to go deeper into the data. You need to understand the players in a lot more detail than that. Because there's nothing really that you can action from that statistic. There's nothing really that you can change in terms of improving the player behavior. You might suspect that you've got a problem, but you need to dig deeper to work out where. So this is a game performance metric. Oh, excuse me. So what's actually better, in our view, is that you start to look at the players and the player base and start to segment the player base so that you get to know the different types of players in your base. Fundamentally, the recognition that not all players are the same. Averages and medians and statistics really don't tell you anything. And it's about understanding the distribution of players and doing that in a multivariate way so that you can understand segments of players, key behaviors, and start to build up a really clear picture of the dynamics that are occurring within your playing base. So better is to understand the number of sessions per player. You can see that on the left-hand part of the chart, we've got quite a lot of players that have got one session only. Are those players going to come back? Have they gone for good? How long was their session? What was their experience like through the course of that session? Were they frustrated? Were they impatient? Were they engaged? Were they quite happy with the tutorial? What was their experience like? And therefore, is that an exit event that you've seen in the last part of the session, or are they going to come back? And what can we do about that? So what we can do about that is actually predict what's going to happen next, and also then start to personalize the playing experience to react to what the data and the insight is telling us. So here we've got another chart, which is playing speed, and that's how quickly players move through the game, how quickly they experience the different events that have been configured in the data collection. So over on this side, players have got a very slow playing speed. They're going through events very deliberately. So they might be frustrated. They might be unclear on what to do next. The tutorial might not have worked effectively for them. So we've got a problem there, and that's our one-session guys that are frustrated. We've got to action something, whether that's an improvement to the game design or it's actually tailored hints and tips for these guys. Over the other side, where players have got a very quick playing speed, actually too quick, they're impatient, they're not being deliberate, they're not engaging with the game. So there's another retention issue. It's at the other end of the spectrum, but it's a problem nonetheless, and we need to understand how we can address that issue in a proactive way to make the playing experience right for these guys. And the critical part of this is actually the guys in the middle are fine, they're happy, they're engaged, they're coming back. So let's not disrupt them. We don't want to send them personalized messages because they don't need them. So the big opportunity here is to reorientate game design to be much more player-centric, to understand these different segments and to react to them as we see them in the game. So this is a player metric. And the more player metrics that we can combine with the game performance metrics, the more understanding and insight we will have into the player base and how we can optimize the game. So, what do we do about these guys? Sometimes this comes back to critical design decisions. Is the tutorial generally unclear, or is there only a problem for this subset of players? Is the game perhaps too difficult in the early stages? Does the game require the players to upgrade and spend in the store too early? You know, a lot of game development and a lot of theory now has gone into social game design and being generous in the early part of the game, gifting items to reward players for their engagement and commitment, rather than being too quick to try and monetize the game. It's certainly one thing that we've seen time and again helps to build the long-time engagement of games and their success. Do some players run out of resource too quickly? Is it too slow? So all of these things can then be answered by the data. But it's not one chart in a dashboard. As you know, it's a series of charts. It's peeling the onion, and it's getting deeper and deeper until you find the actionable bit of insight that feeds back into the game design team. Also, though, there's the opportunity to be specific about this, and this is why we talk about player relationship management. So if the problem is not for the whole of the playing base, but is for a specific component of the playing base, then let's action that. And we've built a technology at Games Analytics that allows us to implement predictive models, so we can understand ahead of time whether players are likely to leave the game or whether they've got potential to spend. And then we can message to those players in real time with offers, rewards, incentives, so we can actually build that personalized and proactive relationship by responding to how the players are experiencing the games and building that for individual players. So it's a brand new dynamic, and we're living through the last few years. We've been living through what makes social games and online games successful, and it does require different thinking. Obviously, the need for great creative ideas is still there, but that can be augmented by analytics. So, using real players to optimize the game in your beta phase. We don't need many players. We don't need tens of thousands of players to do this stuff. A couple of hundred, a couple of thousand can start to generate real insights that is actually like focus groups, but with more data. We're not any longer making games for a single demographic. So gut feel and intuition is great, and there's no replacement to that experience, but let's back it up with data analytics to actually understand how different demographics are responding within the games and how you're aligning the profile of your users with how you're developing the game. And just recognize that there are different players in there. There are aggressive players, there are more passive players, there's players that like to customize, there's players that are sociable, there's competent players, there's players that are not so competent, and let's help them through that experience by orientating the game around them, rather than the game being orientated by the players having to orientate themselves around the game. So each player is experiencing the game differently, and it's understanding these playing behaviors is vital, so that then we can continually develop the game. Because the game, as Philip Reisberger was saying earlier today, the game constantly needs to have attention at the right level of investment to maintain its success and to maintain its vitality. But there are some challenges in getting there. Obviously, it's big data. for large games with rich data and complex events, we can see between 80 and 100 different types of events being collected on any game, events coming through every 3 seconds, let's say. So that data builds up quickly. There are complex player behaviors in there, and we've been developing statistics that let us understand the complexity of those behaviors, understand the social networks that occur in games, whether players are at the hub of a network or on the periphery, what are the series of events within the game that then result in a player leaving the game, what are the series of events in a game that result in a player spending in the game, and then taking that information and building predictive models to understand which players look like them, and we can take action through messaging to improve conversion and improve retention in that way. So although we're very happy with 1 to 3% payment, percentage paying, or if not happy, content, what about the other 99%? Let's focus on them and let's see which ones in the playing base that we've spent all of that money acquiring have got likelihood to spend with a bit of encouragement, would stay if they were given proper treatment and the game was a bit more generous to them, a bit more helpful to them. And so building this sort of thinking into the business and into the culture is extremely valuable, and we think is where the games industry will go over the next couple of years, that this is part of the fabric of every game development and game publisher. So the 3 goals that the data and analytics can deliver that will support the creative ideas and the great development practices are testing and learning. So every game design change that we make, A/B test it, understand the uplift on that. Have we broken something else? What are the ROIs coming back? Which segments reacted badly? Which segments reacted well? So test and learn, constantly cycle round, changing, monitoring, and then learning from your successes. Be responsive to the individual players. So understand which players are not having a great time and react to that. Also understand who's the potential VIPs and the VIPs to reward them, keep them engaged in the game, and actually looking ahead. So let's predict who's going to leave the game and start communicating to them before they're gone, because it's very hard to get them back once they've gone. Let's try and be proactive about the relationship and build that proactively within the game through messaging, through gifts, through incentives and rewards. So how do we do that? Where to start? So this is an example of a segmentation that is an online browser social type of game. And we've cross-referenced the revenue potential of the players by their virality, their socialness. And you can see that we've got 7 segments here. Top right, the dark green, those are the players that have got high revenue potential. They're highly sociable as well. So we call them our early enthusiasts. There are players with high potential. We want to keep them engaged. We want to reward them. We don't need to overly monetize them because that will come naturally. And we'll start to build communication patterns to those guys in a very different way from the guys in the purple circle that are top left. Very much less revenue potential, still highly sociable. So they're influencing a lot of people in your game, but they're not valuable in their own right. That means that we don't want to upset them. We want to reward them. Their viral revenue that they're introducing into the game could be significant. So they're key influencers within the playing base. So let's think of another communication strategy that addresses that type of player. So you can start to see that this is a marketing piece of middleware that sits alongside the game that allows us to develop specific contact strategies for each type of player. In the middle is the big worrying segments of players that have got potential to leave. Losing momentum can be for 6, 8, 10 different reasons, some of which I've already talked about. And that's when we can move from segmenting the playing base into actually building predictive models to put players into target groups to action specific reasons why players are leaving the game. The system and the technology that we've built has 4 components. A collect SDK, data collection, delivering to us the rich data that allows us to build the predictive models and apply them. We have a predict scoring engine that puts players into categories of target groups for treatment with marketing messages. We've got an engage SDK, which sends the messages into the game. That can be a deep integration in terms of dialog boxes, or a light integration in terms of a messaging layer on top of the game. And then ultimately, a 4th component is our measure dashboards. So everything that we do, we test and learn. We understand the revenue uplift that's delivered against the messaging compared with a set of players that we hold out that aren't messaged. So we can constantly tune the system, and we can optimize the game in terms of the revenue and engagement that we're delivering for the players. The targeting is driven by predictive models, and this is an example of a defection model. So we have 3 cohorts here of players that we've tracked from the start of their gameplay through 150 events, which might be 20 minutes, through to 500 events, which might be an hour or more. And we've got early defectors that left the game without really engaging with the game. We've got defectors that did engage and moved through some of the levels and started to consume some of the features, but then ultimately left. And we've got engaged players that continued through the levels and are very dynamically interested and committed to the game. So we want to understand, are there differences in the gameplay between engaged players during this first 20-minute onboarding process compared to the defectors that left after 150 events? And the answer is there are clear differences. We've got lots of data that we can put to this problem. We might have some demographic information, which is generally quite blunt, but is helpful to start the modeling process off. We can build player metrics like the ones that we've just seen in terms of playing speed and level momentum, how sociable players are, how they consume their features, and how they consume resources. And we can go down into detailed events as well, what quests have been completed, what quests have been attempted, a whole rich variety of data that we can use to differentiate defectors from engaged players. And then we can start to apply these models in real time. And so as the player gets to the 150th event or a suitable point in the gameplay, we can introduce incentives and rewards to continue their engagement, to solve the retention problem, and to motivate them to keep going in the game. And this approach has had a dramatic effect on a wide range of game genres and platforms that we've worked on. 50% improvement in retention is typical through this personalized approach, because you're actually solving the problem by being specific about the issue, rather than trying to introduce broad game development changes that apply across the board. So, but that's only one example. When you start to think about how players move through games, from entry to discovery to engagement, through advocacy, and then mastery of the game, disengagement, and ultimately defection, you can see that there's different strategies that we want to adopt at each part of those cycles, from retain and engage through to socialize, through to monetize, and then retain again. Trouble is, different players move at different speeds through this path. Different players have also got different playing styles, whether they're aggressive or they're passive or they're customizers and decorators, socializers. So we actually need, this is too simple to be personalizing the relationship. So what we can do is overlay on top of this our individual marketing strategies. And here, really, the world is our oyster. We can be very creative about the types of marketing offers and messages that we can deliver into players. And these are just some examples of messages that we've implemented as part of a contact strategy within games. Now, this sounds like quite a big deal and quite a lot of work, but actually, the methodologies that we've built in games analytics and the technology that we deploy makes this a 4-week iterative cycle to get up and running. It takes, we need to take about 3 to 5 days of developer time to implement this. So actually, the targeted messages can quite quickly be flowing and producing the real results that I've already talked about. So it is an investment in time, and it perhaps is for a slightly different way of thinking. But it also delivers a personalized experience for each player. So player relationship marketing and player relationship management is truly within reach. And ultimately, it's worth it, because if it wasn't worth it, then analytics companies like ours wouldn't exist. We've got to deliver more in terms of the value add. So 38% uplift in revenues, 50% uplift in retentions. We can make dramatic changes to game revenues and game success. And it's all through understanding the players. So the science of listening. There's a lot of data out there. We can collect it, we can analyze it, and we can action it. So the opportunity for the industry is to make sure that we're listening and we're being responsive to the players that we've spent all of that hard money acquiring. That's it. Thank you very much.